So this morning we wanted to chat with you a little bit about the definitions that are being used in museums and in culture, heritage institutions, etc. So the kind of verbiage that's used in these big defining bodies that help to preserve both tangible and intangible heritage. So how these things are defined, we'll just start out with they tend to categorize different cultural objects as movable, things we can move, very simple, and things maybe we can't move, the physical structure. Yeah, so things that are portable and things that are not portable. Make sense? Okay. So when the words they use are movable and immovable cultural heritage. The other terms they use are tangible and intangible. Preserving an intangible aspect of it would be preserving the sacredness. We talked about how sometimes people might remove some sacred consecration, like rinzal, inside of a statue, and then it becomes deconsecrated, or something is no longer in a particular space, so that takes it out of its cultural context and it loses some meaning. So when these institutions talk, they talk about that. So what we can touch is tangible, yeah. What we can't touch is intangible. So yes, you have to preserve the physical nature of the object, but over here you also have to preserve, well, you don't have to, it's your decision, but maybe it's good that you also preserve the skill with which these objects are made. And then if people don't wear the objects, then that is an intangible aspect of it, even though it's tangible. You see, they're kind of co-joined. So this is how they condition themselves to approach the cultural heritage. So with the intangible cultural heritage, what's happening now is, or not now, but it's been a while really, is to try and have a register. So how you have UNESCO World Heritage Sites, have we all heard about that? World Heritage Sites. So and it could be not necessarily be a physical space, it could be a space of natural beauty. So there's Ayers Rock in Australia, and it's considered a sacred space, and it's essentially what I would say is a mountain, but you probably wouldn't consider it a mountain. So yeah, that's considered a place that's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So what they're doing now is there's a register, and you can say, okay, well this is at risk, and this is a real very important part of our cultural heritage. And we want to preserve that. So that could be anything from oral traditions and expressions. Language can be endangered. Sometimes people are not allowed to speak their original language, or sometimes it could even be the art of debating. That's an intangible cultural heritage that's critical for the understanding of the Buddha Dharma. There could be dances, so different types of both cultural dances like kaita, but also ritual dances, yogas, and traditional craftsmanship. So what it's like to actually carve particular texts. So there, you can go on the website and see, well, what is registered. I know that certain Thai Buddhist communities have registered parts of their teachings, and for instance in my country they even decided that they were going to register road tennis, where they play on the street. So it can be a little bit like this. So this is what's happening there. So many different institutions to help to preserve material cultural heritage, movable and immovable, intangible and intangible. Sometimes these places you can join. I know there's been some challenging joining some other ones, which it would be good to speak to. But what they do have is on their websites, they have lots of information, from very basic information about, where should you store your objects, in what conditions should you store, where can you find resources, where can you find grants, Blue Shield is if there is a major, disaster, then they help to support, but they also have documents to help. And this is both in communities, it's both in religious organizations and museums, galleries, etc. So it's all there, just to make you aware. The other thing is advocacy for your collections matter, so it's just resources. And what they do is they use the verbiage of all governments have the sustainable development goals. And the whole point of having these objects is so that, we add to the benefit and the enhancement of the communities, both local communities and wider afield. It's worthwhile, these little websites, you can have a look. Now, when, especially in the West and in the East, these are the agreed definitions by International Council of Museums. Now, International Council of Museums, they changed their definition of what a museum should be doing recently, because it was very, Eurocentric, and now it's a little bit more all-inclusive. But how they define what restoration is all actions directly applied to a single and stable item aimed at facilitating appreciation, understanding, and use. These actions are only carried out when the item has lost part of its significance or function through past alteration, deterioration. They're based on respect for the original material, and most often such actions modify the appearance of the item. So quite precise. Another way of saying basically is we return the object to the state it was in when it was originally created. And typically this is because it has a function, it has a purpose, so it has to be in a particular condition. Sometimes this is because of religious use or visual appreciation of the object. And so the object can be used for its original purpose. So it might actually, a book has to open in a particular way. If it doesn't open, then it can't use. Your bell has to ring in order for you to use in a ceremony. We would say that this is highly restored, and conservators wouldn't probably go to this level. We would probably just stabilize it to the state, where all the flaking bits of paint were still on. But this is something that's been highly restored. And it was quite controversial at the time. So this is maybe slightly less controversial, but what you can see is you had the marks of going through the underdrawings, and they lost paint, and you can see how the artist was reworking. But you couldn't really read this figure. So this is Maya wringing out her hair, so that all the maras, they get washed away. But there was confusion about, or discussion whether this should happen because, it's interesting to see the underdrawings, but in speaking to a venerable, they said, no, it's better because this is a central important figure that, you tone it, but you can at least read the face. But you could say, actually, it's better if it's fully restored. But in this instance, it wasn't fully restored. It was so we can read the face, but this was in a museum, not in a temple. So maybe if it was in a wat, like their gompa, then maybe they would have done it differently. Depends on where the object is. So that this is still considered restoration, even though it isn't as much as this. Okay? And I don't think there's right and wrong, really. Conservation, so we had restoration, this is conservation now. So again, ICOM defines conservation as all measures and actions aimed at safeguarding tangible cultural heritage while ensuring its accessibility to the present and future generation. It embraces preventive conservation, remedial conservation, and restoration. So sometimes these are intertwined. And all measures and actions should respect the significance and physical properties of the cultural heritage. So that means that sometimes we will not take it to the full level, but we want to stabilize what's there. Right. Basically, what that means is we'll document the conservation. You consult with custodians or stakeholders. There are codes and ethics that you have to sign up to make sure that things are retreatable. There is minimum intervention. On restoration, you will be very interventive. On conservation, you just try to stabilize. And you'll take into account the patina or the dirt on a particular object. And like I say, it's retreatability. So it would be, for instance, here you can see we're sticking the paint flakes back on. We're misting some consolidant onto the surface while the tanka is being humidified. So there's little intervention, but not as major. Now we have preservation. Yeah? So preservation is the protection of cultural property through the activities that minimize chemical and physical deterioration and damage, and that prevent the loss of informational content. The primary goal of preservation is to prolong the existence of the cultural property. So with conservation, we can spend like 100 hours just conserving one object, yeah? And then we make that object good. With preservation and collection care, you have impact on, I wouldn't say countless, but maybe hundreds of objects. Yeah, because this is the storage areas. This is the place, you are looking at your buildings, you're looking at controlling temperature and humidity, making sure that all your areas are cleaned. So sometimes there's a little intervention, but it is about like what we were doing with cleaning some of the objects, and it's everyday stuff. Checking to see that the insects are not there, that there's no leaks coming in, We all see that we're taking part. Measuring the lux levels. This is the lux reader that everybody's been talking about. So you can have a handheld one that does temperature, humidity, ultraviolet light. So we mitigate the agents of deterioration. What attacks our cultural heritage? We manage the environment, how the objects are used, stored, and documented. Anything that happens to the object, we look at the risks to it, and that's what preventive conservation does. In some ways, I think we argue in the conservation realms that maybe there's no, why conserve something if you put it back in danger? So when we speak about the agents of deterioration, what do we mean? We all know this, we know it automatically, it's common sense. But we have light, so that's both ultraviolet light and lux levels, and you can have incorrect light. We have water, you can have flood, and when we're risk assessing things, it can be a slow leak and over a long period of time can cause major damage, or it could be monsoon, all of a sudden a big flood happens. Yeah, a real disaster, but sometimes it can be innocuous, it could be slowly, and other times it could be just in one go. So we look at both slow water damage and really heavy, disastrous water damage. Pollutants. Mike and Teresa were speaking about this yesterday. The pollutants are, both in the air, and you can also consider, in this realm, we consider dust also a pollutant, yeah? And we would consider mold issue with that. And smoke and soot. Incense, I'm afraid so. Incense is not a pollutant. It's a wonderful offering, but we joke, but it does have an effect on the tankas, especially when you have your, and Teresa will go into this later, when you have your tanka there and you have your altar, there's resin in the incense, and that darkens the pigment. So we have to think maybe, okay, yes, we offer, but maybe we offer a little bit, further away. We'll have to find a way. But the whole point of having the tanka is for use, and it's all, the incense is part of it. So you could turn around and argue, well, that darkening is of historical importance to the object. Yeah, so lots of debate. Physical force, scratches, abrasions, if somebody hits something and throws it over, it makes sense, no? And we could have small physical forces with abrasions, yeah, with little tiny scratches, accidental, or you could have big physical force where, for instance, something knocks off and an element comes off. So physical force on that statue over there was the fingers. Who looked at that statue? Remember, the fingers were off, so that is a physical force. But to be able to argue, you need to know the agents of deterioration and look at it with that particular object type. So look at it, how will these agents, or afflictions, if you wish, how will that affect a sculpture? How will it affect a photograph? How will it affect a painting? And you can mitigate like that. Is that making sense? Yeah? Okay. So you have thieves, vandals, and displacers. So disassociation is also part of a deterioration thing. The thieves and vandals make sense. If anybody steals something, that's an agent of deterioration. We no longer have access to it. We can't use it. Vandals, the Bamyan, the Buddhas, and all of the stuff that's been going on previously in Afghanistan with Buddhas being blown up. That's more than, vandalism seems a little bit of a lower word to use. And displacers is just quite simply, if you have one manuscript, you've put it in your library, and then somebody takes it and they don't put it back in the right order, or they put the wrong title on it, then it's displaced. The knowledge is not accessible. Yeah. So that's a form of disassociation, and it's a agent of deterioration for access to it. They're very particular with this: incorrect temperature and incorrect humidity. Not temperature and humidity. It's incorrect, but it's incorrect depending on the object. So we had also the light, incorrect lux. So sometimes it's between 50 and 200 or 250 lux. Some people even go down to as low as 40, but you need to know what your objects are made out of, and then you know how much you can increase the light, because some things are more sturdy. So it's the same thing with temperature and humidity. And if this goes across also plastics, and if you have time-based media as well, so things are only stored electronically, maybe you have to store them in 3 different places. Yeah, and this could be teachings, because a lot of teachings are, they're oral, and we record those teachings, so we have to make them, accessible, even though they might be based on a particular text. Pests, we know. Pests are sometimes human. No, I'm slightly joking. But sometimes the humans do physical force on the object. So yeah, when we say pests, they're more to do with. It could even be monkeys. Yeah, it could be, even though they're very cute. It could be the rodents. We have a rat problem and mice problem here. It could be the silverfish. It could be different things. So you need to know what your pests are and what they like to eat. Yeah, we'll be speaking about this later as well. Like in certain countries, bats are a problem, and the bats are protected. And in other places, we even have budgies are a problem, or pigeons in the UK are a big problem. Yeah? So we have to try and mitigate and prevent that. Custodial neglect, not looking after your objects. And it could be because, maybe we didn't have enough money to look after them, but there's lots of quick things we can do. Or maybe we didn't record and inventory our objects properly, and then we lost them. Yeah, maybe we didn't lock the door. Maybe we forgot to leave a window open, and then the rain came in. That's all custodial neglect. Fire is simple. especially in a lot of monasteries, well, in all museums, galleries as well, but in many monasteries that are, you know, far away, sometimes what we keep hearing is the electrics are not so good, the electrical wiring, and they need to update it. So they're really concerned about fires are big risks. And then, so all of this, the 10 agents, we do when we're assessing a space, like what you have done basically at the Tibet Museum and what you're going to be doing in your own institutions. But we can also look at these afflictions and agents of deterioration amongst the actual different object types that we have. Yeah? So just to ask a little bit more about your spaces, in your regions, what would you say would be is it all of these together, or is there one that's really big that you'd be worried about? Huh? Temperature, okay. And sometimes fluctuation in temperatures are, you know, we might have a monsoon season and a dry season. Yeah. What else? Pest. Yeah, and we'll definitely going to be talking about that later. Yeah. Anything else? So mainly water, pest, light. Yeah. As we saw in the museums, dust is yeah. And if you're on a very busy space, like a busy road, then you have the carbon monoxide as well. And if you have construction dust, if you have lots of construction going on, there are even like some dust is more heavy than others as well, and that can cause problems not only for the objects but also for the people. Yeah, it's clear.